please welcome Dr. Laura Dern. We do have a degree.
Wow. Thank you so much. When I was 17, I went to college. And on day 2 in university, I got cast in a movie. And I was desperate to do this movie. And the head of the film department, they said, you can't get a leave of absence. It doesn't work that way. You can't leave. So I went to the head of the film department. They said, you know, we want to read the script. We want to hear how long it's going to take, all these things. So I gave them all the information. And at the end, they read it and said, not only are you giving up your college career if you go make this film, but we can't believe you would want to do this movie anyway. And yes, that movie was Blue Velvet. And now, when you go to get your master's in film at that school, of three movies that are musts, one of them is Blue Velvet. But I never got a degree until now. So I'm super grateful.
You know, your childhood, I assume, is very normal to you. But, you know, for people who don't know, your mother is Diane Ladd. Your father is Bruce Dern. Your godmother was Shelley Winters. I'm curious about, like, you know, could you paint a little picture about, like, what your childhood was like growing up around really committed and serious actors and also being interested in acting yourself at that time?
Tea is so good. I mean, I wish you all had it. It's delicious. Thank you so much.
You're going to start another meme of you sipping tea.
Well, here's what's crazy is now we're all grown-ups reflecting back, and we all had, you know, we all normalized our childhoods. You know, we had to. And so, however complicated it was, given dynamics in the household, we only learn as adults what actually was going on with deeper understanding. So, with that said, I feel like mine was as normal and as crazy as everybody else's now that we're grown-ups having dinner going. And then my mom said, you know, and then they were fighting, you know, and we learn about the stuff the adults around us were going through. I find myself radically lucky because I was raised not only by people who considered themselves craftspeople at a job, but at a time pre-social media and pre-actors on the cover of magazines. There were like models who were on the cover of magazines and actors who you saw on Johnny Carson, because that was it, or I think, and this was even a little bit before them, there was Film Comment or American Film Magazine, and that was maybe an actor would do an interview for that. And that was press for a movie. And so I never grew up around like a glamorous childhood. And my parents, actors, you know, didn't make a great living, just like anyone in the arts. So the sort of the kid of artists in LA were not the wealthy kids at school. We were, you know, kind of workers. And I'm really grateful for that. I think it really prepared me for an understanding of the ebb and flow of the career of an artist. I don't know that it kept me humble. You'll decide in an hour. But then I was humble. And now I'm fabulous. But we were just, you know, a regular family, really. And yes, there were moments in my parents' career that were very celebrated, and I was aware that people loved their work. But, you know, they were deep students of acting. And so my whole childhood was about continual study and moderating at the Actors Studio. My godmother was a big teacher at the Actors Studio here in New York, as were both my parents. My dad helped found the Actors Studio in LA and taught there. And so it really mattered to them. And playing complicated, flawed protagonists, working with filmmakers who cared about honest, deep, messy narratives because it was the 70s and those were the movies that were made. Please God, I think we've got some amazing filmmakers who are getting us back to that, and thanks to live streaming and cable, there's all kinds of space to now explore that more and more. But it really set a tone for what I would end up longing for in my own acting, but also what a kind of balance I would hope for my kids amidst stuff that can feel weird, you know, or unusual, based on maybe other people's childhoods when you're amidst it. So, yeah.
I'm curious what you make of the shift in culture of actors as celebrities, that is, you know, powered by stan culture on social media. You know, they are on the covers of magazines now. Do you think it has been bad for the craft?
I wouldn't say it's bad for the craft, but it can be bad for an individual, right? I think it's hardest for a really young person to come into great success now than maybe before because, you know, our standards have changed, right? So like we're now measuring success on a number of followers, and we're using words with 14-year-olds who are famous from a Netflix or HBO show. We're sitting down and having conversations with like their team about branding them and like marketing them. That, for a young artist, I would think is a real slippery slope. And I'm very impressed at the people who can navigate it healthfully. Because I felt like, I don't know, in whatever any of us do, journalists, actors, writers, we're if you're in the arts, it's a thing you don't measure, right? We always got lucky. I mean, it's probably why my family, we all went into it. It's like, great. There's not like a finish line. You don't get graded. You just kind of do your thing. And there's no right or wrong in this elusive exploration of the truth. And so that felt really cool. And now suddenly it's like, oh, well, they only have this many, or it only made that much, or there's only that viewership. And, well, it's not on the, you know, paid, whatever, when you're on your Netflix, you know, they're like, well, all the algorithms of counting how many times it's up on your page, certain movies, and there's so many ways to measure you now. So we've at least had a little time to find our own way to measure ourselves, and we know we can be our own worst critics. But imagine being, you know, a teenager and getting success as a musician or actor or model or whatever it is now, athlete, Greta, you know, I mean, these spaces of like, they're going to change the planet and 80 million followers care about it. You know, whatever that is just so enormous. It's interesting, complicated, and it's brought a lot of good in other ways too. Awareness and, you know, transparency, and some hopeful transparency in some areas, like politics.
Right.
It can be good.
Well, so, you know, it's interesting to hear you talk a little bit about what it's like to be a young working actor today versus maybe what it was like for you. Because you always seem to have this really precocious idea and clarity about the work that you wanted to do. And I wanted to maybe read you a quick quote, which is from...
Alina, don't listen to
1985. You said, I'm getting quite a few offers, but many of them are teen exploitation films, which I don't want to do. There are a couple things that I'd love to do, but I'm still a little young to play 30. I can't do those Meryl Streep type roles yet. What matters most is I play someone totally different from what I've done before. I always want to play bright people. I'd like to play someone in politics, sort of a woman's version of Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. And I'd like to play a strung-out drug addict who sleeps with a different guy every night. Why not? I'd like to play everything. And I'm curious to hear you talk a little bit about what your expectations were at that age and how that compares with your career and what has happened in reality. Did it meet it, so far? Has it yet to go? Did it change? Sorry.
All of that, I think. And it's funny, right? Like, what's naive when we're 16, 17, and what is still us? And for sure, I still intend or try to play things I've never played, or really want to play the opposite the next time in a journey. Like, all of that is, I think, every actor's passion. I think it was a particular passion of mine at that age because it was the first time I started talking to my dad about career choices as an actor. And he, who's such a brilliant actor and is hilarious and is tender and is so many things as an actor and has played that, he really felt burdened by having been typecast and pigeonholed because he was the guy who killed John Wayne in this film, The Cowboys. And he was on the cover of Life magazine, the man who kills John Wayne, right? So that's tough. And he loved it, and it was great, but then he was the bad guy in movies for a while. And so he kind of gave me that cautionary tale. So I think that's sort of what lived in that, and I think has really served me when I've been lucky enough to have a choice. We also go where the work is as actors, and especially young actors. And, you hope for a successful career. My parents are 80 and they don't always have their choices, and they want to act till they're not here anymore. I mean, they want to be going out making a movie. That's who they are. They love it. And so I say it with gratitude when I have been lucky to make a choice about the characters I play. But where has it not? I don't know. I think, I think there's a seed change culturally that we're all waking up to. I mean, many have been awake for a very long time, but I mean, as a culture, we're waking up together. And it's about representation and gender and diversity parity, and we're having these conversations in the arts, but they're having the same conversations in marketing. And the reason they isn't because #MeToo, we're all awake now, we want to do the right thing. No, it's because the consumer is saying to everyone, we want to buy ourselves. We want to buy our own stories. Whether we're watching TV or we're buying an anti-wrinkle cream, we don't really want a 19-year-old who's also been airbrushed to sell it to us. I'm 60, I want a 60-year-old woman. I'm not 60. It's not a bad thing. I'm just not ready yet. Just let this decade enjoy itself. But what if I went like way over the top when I realized that like broke a bottle against the screen? But I think it's exciting. It's exciting to start to see beauty campaigns and fashion designers, really honor representation and film and television and the coverage of stories, the truth, not just the lie. So it's an exciting time, and with that, I feel like myself and many artists, fine artists too, are really feeling blessed. You know, MoMA's really looking at honoring diversity in a profound way that it's inspiring museums around the world. You know, women have been so poorly represented in fine art museums for so many years. And so you see the change, and certainly in corporate and publishing and tech. So it's an exciting time. And with that, suddenly, more women's stories and more diversity is seen in film and television because it's making money for them. Because they realize the audience wants that. And so it's really good news, but it's taken money. It's not taken consciousness. I hate to say it. We wanted to be conscious about it, but the people who wanted to have their investment, you know, successful and you know, see real numbers shift, it's a great time. And it's like, it's because the consumer is awake to saying, oh no, I don't have to buy what you sell me. I get to seek out the story I want told to me or my kids. It's awesome.
This desire to, you know, the conversations that you had with your dad when you didn't want to be typecast, it sounded like. I'm curious, what were some of the things that you turned down, that you tried to manage the limited choices, I assume, that you had at the time?
Turned down or hoped I wouldn't get, even though I auditioned for them. You know what I mean? Like there were those moments too of like.
Like what?
Well, I'll never say names, only because like it was meant to go to that actor, and I feel like then it muddies the water of. Don't you guys hate that when you're like, somebody's in an interview?
No, I love tea.
You don't? I mean, it's interesting, but it's also a little mean. Like, oh, it's so interesting she did that, but I turned that down. It's kind of like. I read an actress's interview recently. She did say it like that. And I was like, you don't have to let everybody know how many things you've been offered. But listen, hand-me-downs are awesome. But, you know, definitely there were choices. Like the one biggest choice was there was a sort of Brat Pack era film where I got offered the girlfriend part, and it was like a big deal, and it was going to be great in terms of success, and the lead female. And then I got offered this small role to work with Peter Bogdanovich in Mask. And I think if I didn't have my parents, I wouldn't have known how lucky I was to get to work with Peter Bogdanovich. And that was clearly the role. Because the agent goes, well, that's no money. That's lots of money. This is like big studio, you know, whatever, the things that are measured. And you're a kid and you don't know for sure. I was 15. So those kinds of choices, I think, really helped shape the trajectory of maybe where I hoped to go and maybe partly where I am now. But in the quote, you know, it's clear. I want to play everything. I have no judgment. And I think that's true, and I've loved all my characters, even the drug addict who slept with a different guy every night. Check.
Citizen Ruth?
Yeah. And I don't think at 17 I realized just what I was asking for. I was like, no, she thinks like sort of cute drugs where it's like sort of a drug addict, like at one party, not like huffing paint every day while you're pregnant and homeless. But you know, I love that character. But preceding that, I think, you know, the sort of adorable script about the really adorable hooker who has the adorable, you know, that kind of stuff. Where you're like, even as a teenager with other actresses, you know, we'd talk about some of the parts where it was like, she's so cute while she's, you know, whoring herself out or whatever in an adorable way, and always fashionable, whatever that is, you know, that the trends, the always forgiving girlfriend who has no voice in the relationship, and he goes and sleeps with like the nasty girl, but then he comes back to her and she's so lucky. So those kinds of parts where I was ready to play it, you know, because I was auditioning for everything, but something inside you is like, ugh, this is not the story I want to tell because this doesn't feel true. And it's exciting that that's shifting. The more great writers are getting to have their material made.
Did you ever wonder what your career would be like if you were male?
My favorite compliment was a great actor who I really admired. We had done a screen test for a movie together, and I was in my early 20s, and he said, "You remind me of Charles Laughton." And I was taken aback, and he was, a beautiful genius. So I didn't love that until I realized that that was just the most incredible compliment ever as I learned more about Laughton in his ability to transform and play so many different characters. And so I think so many of us females would have had a lot more opportunity, a lot younger, to play the mess and to not have the response have anything to do with acting. I remember, because you mentioned Enlightened, which is this HBO show I did, and when I started doing press, my first interview with a journalist was a female journalist, and she was like, "Oh, how are you comfortable playing someone like so ugly? Like, that's really, are you sure you want to do that? Like, and how did HBO decide to do that? I mean, she's angry all the time. She's so unlikable. I mean, anger on a woman, I don't know." And it was so amazing to me. And while she's saying this, we had just started the other show on HBO, which she then touted as extraordinary, and he's so sexy. And it's just weird. Like, here they have this like sexy, iconic male and this like mess of a kind of ugly, angry girl. His name was Tony Soprano, and he was the sexy, iconic male. But I was mad, so I was gross. I mean, that's incredible, isn't it? It's incredible. So I think I could have been Tony Soprano if I were a guy. Or Tom Hanks, who can be affable and a beast, and adorable. I mean, it doesn't matter. There's much more fluidity in the career of a male actor, but we're determined to change that, guys, right?
Did you feel like Enlightened was, I think a lot of people talk about it as maybe too soon. Do you feel like it happened too soon?
Yes, but unfortunately,
Right.
the idea was to make it, and then we'd all wake up and we'd see our cultural apathy so that we never again would let them get away with anything. Because it just, this sort of character came to mind when I was working on a film about the recount. And I was like, no one's getting in the streets. No one's irate. What's happening? Where have we gone? Where's our determination, our marching fighter spirit? And that feeling was like, well, who burns all bridges, becomes the whistleblower, doesn't care if her family hates her at all costs. She may be complicated at home, but she will get in the face of corporate America and say, "No more, I'm exposing you." And that was the idea. And the people who enjoyed it were like, "Oh yeah, we're there." But now, this year, this moment, particularly, everywhere I go, people are bringing it up like, "Oh my God, I just found Enlightened. We are Amy Jellicoe. We're all Amy." But it could have been different. I mean, not that we always don't have that. I mean, there's still big food and big pharma and soon big water, and they're out there. And the NRA is out there. So we still need that. I just mean, like, in terms of the White House itself. Like, I just think there's more fighter spirit and revolution awake in us because we really are, in the quote of Patty Chayefsky from Network, mad as hell and we're not going to take it anymore. And that's great news. But I think that's why Enlightened is, a good fever pitch place to go when you're feeling like her, which I do a lot of the time.
Would you bring the show back?
We've talked about it. Let me take a lozenge. We've talked about it. I mean, Mike and I's fantasy always was 3 seasons, and we only did 2. So I think there was a real mapped out third place to go. And it was hard, and it was a very different show, which now is very normal, which is exciting, that it seemed so radical only a few years ago. But the bummer was we got canceled based on live ratings because that's the way we measured TV. And a year later, we were measuring TiVo ratings. Remember that thing? And now, luckily, all of it's in the algorithm. And so all these companies can know success based on the fact that some people watch it 8 months later, some people binge watch, some people. And about 6 months later, we had an incredibly successful show. And not to tout our show, but just to say, about 3 months after the decision was, like, let's just let it be there. And we did create an ending that perhaps that would be the end. We weren't 100% sure, but we thought we could do this third round. And we, with HBO, they said, no, let's do this. And I think a month later, Time Magazine named it the best television show ever. I mean, it was like crazy. It was crazy. And then all the other, reviews came out, sort of top 10 shows, and it was #1 over, like, Breaking Bad, which is a masterpiece, and shows that had immense success in many seasons. But if Amy were a male character...
I'll let you take the lozenge. Yeah.
Talk to the guy.
Well, this will give me an opportunity to recap some of the early films from the 80s that you did when you were younger, like Smooth Talk, which is the one that I was talking about in the beginning. And then there's also Wild at Heart and Rambling Rose. And thinking about all of these films together is really interesting because your character's kind of like attracted to the danger of maybe her own sexuality, but also this other male figure. And in an interview in 1990, shortly after, you said that you felt that Connie and Lula in Wild at Heart and Smooth Talk were both in control in those scenes. There are sort of scenes of aggression, like male aggression, right? And I'm curious if you still feel that way, like now, sort of looking back on it.
No, I don't. I mean, I think they were doing everything to try to make themselves in control. So I think I was right in saying that because that's what I felt for the character. But as an audience, no. I mean, I was 15, I think I turned 16 right around when we had just started Smooth Talk. And then I was probably 17 when it was released. So I was still at an age where I was naive enough to miss the movie I was making. And it's based on a Joyce Carol Oates short story that is incredibly dark. And she's clearly sexually assaulted at the end of this.
Oh, you do think she was?
Piece. Well, I mean, in the short story.
Okay.
Ultimately, in the short story, it's clear she is never coming home either. And it's devastating. Amazingly, I think I felt that the exploration of the character's control was there, and I was being directed by a woman who is a radical and a really interesting documentary filmmaker, Joyce Chopra from New York. So that was what her focus was this girl's need to feel all powerful while this man is coaxing her out of her home. And so with some sense of control, she finally, after it's a 30-minute scene.
It's a 30-minute scene at the house where he's trying to get her out.
Which is amazing in a movie. Yeah. And at the end, she finally decides to go with him in her mind to protect herself from the fact that how is she not? I mean, either they're going to pull her out of that house or she's going to choose to go. But I didn't understand that then. I thought it was like, this guy's attracted to her and he really likes her and he's coaxing her and he's flirting. There's another guy in the car. Like, so the mother in me missed it until now I'm a mother, you know? So it's interesting. When it comes to Wild at Heart, I mean, it's, you know, it is interesting. It is considered a rape, a sexual assault scene. And it was like, it is so interesting. Like David Lynch explored so much in that scene because ultimately it is an assault, absolutely an assault. It's so violent. He plays the most frightening, hideous character I've ever seen on screen. I'm terrified of him still. And he's super nice. But he gets nothing. I never touch him and I have an orgasm. That's the David exploration of it. Seeming orgasm or titillated. And I think that was, he was looking at how a woman's going to try to take control and set a boundary. So they're weird, complicated scenes. And I think differently about them now because I'm a grown-up. But both of them were deeply thought out and deeply discussed with me, which is amazing too, in a really protective, generous way by both filmmakers.
I mean, it's also interesting to put it in context with The Tale, which you did recently, which was based off of Jennifer Fox's experience, the filmmaker, sort of reflecting back on what she thought was a consensual relationship when she was 13, but then sort of comes to realize as an adult that it's not. Did doing that film sort of help you recontextualize, like thinking about maybe certain scenes that you did or even your own career?
I mean, certainly it added to it. I think just life changes our stories, right? Like, oh, wait a minute. Now I'm 40 and he wasn't a nice person. That's actually, I actually forever have justified that behavior and said, no, you don't understand. Like, he came from addiction, or this was complicated, or that was complicated. And you sit with a girlfriend who's now 40 and says, oh no, I was abused. That's what happened in that relationship. And so we all have those stories, whether they're ours or our friends, our lovers, our sisters, you know. We now, again, as we talked about before, are grown-ups looking back. So I think just life has taught me a little bit more about boundaries in what I would say was a pretty boundaryless world, an artist world anyway, and starting young and seeing a lot and luckily being protected, but still seeing a lot, you know. And then The Tale helped me get into the shoes of the woman who had written it, who was directing me to play her. So it was so intimate and complicated and heartbreaking. And that, if for those of you who haven't seen it, it's a 44-year-old documentarian journalist in New York, lives with her partner, and from a set of circumstances, someone reaching out sort of ends up starting to re-examine this relationship when she was 12 and he was 44 and her camp counselor. And she had remembered the story, and this is all true, that she was almost 17. And it was only after going back and talking to her mother about it that her mother showed her pictures of herself when this affair started, and she was a 12-year-old. So to protect herself, again, this question of control, she'd retold it that, well, she was 16, almost 17, and it was the 70s, and he was in his 40s, but they had real chemistry and connection, and fascinating.
I also mentioned this at the during the intro, but it was recently the 20th anniversary of Ellen DeGeneres' episode, the puppy episode, when she came out both on the show as a character and as a person to the country. And I just wanted to hear the backstory about like how that happened, your own reaction to the ask. Because for people who don't know, you played Susan, who is a character who is an out lesbian and who helps Ellen realize that she's gay. So it's a pretty pivotal character. You're the focus of attraction too. Yeah.
An incredible honor. She was a big fan of Citizen Ruth, and we met, and she asked me, would I come join this effort, really? I mean, not just play a role, because there were several of us. Oprah, who played her therapist in the episode, obviously her cast of her show, and so I was excited. I didn't think twice about it. Sounded amazing. Was a great opportunity, and then the calls started. One side said yes. The calls started coming in. I will say from a couple of advisors in Hollywood who were out gay men to not do it. And a lot of people in my life, like, really worried. And I was like, this is ridiculous. This is where I grew up in a bubble and didn't realize, like, we weren't there yet or something. And so I think the first time I became aware was Oprah and I were having a snack, and true story, and suddenly, like, a flood of cops swarmed the stage while we were rehearsing. They're like, "There's been a bomb threat. We're sweeping the stage," and they start, like, literally rushing us off the stage. One of a few. I mean, we only did it for 10 days. And then for her anniversary, we went on Ellen and talked about it with Oprah, my friend, as well. And we all spent the next couple of years really struggling in work and safety. So it was radical to experience that. It was the only time I ever experienced, having to have full security detail, and it was just crazy. But what was amazing, which I'll never forget, and I've talked about it a little bit on Ellen and to her, is because I just did her show a few days ago, and she feels like such a family member to me, because she shared, and we've now talked about, that when she looked in my eyes, and actually my best friend was there because she had her best friend, my best friend, we all were in that scene together because we were like, this is such a big moment. We didn't rehearse it. So when she said it to me and was looking in my eyes and holding my hands, and I felt her shaking, she said it was the first time she said, "I'm gay," out loud. And to have that, the gift, it makes me want to cry, the gift of that, the intimacy of what that means, was such insight for me. And I'll carry it for the rest of my life. And it's shaped, I hope, and continues to shape who I am as an advocate, as an activist, as a parent. Because it's a profound thing when you see someone bring their truth, but also all the layers of shame and fear that have been put onto you because of feeling like the other in whatever your experience is. So I'm forever grateful.
You said gay rights before the meme.
Exactly. But now I've done the meme too.
I did hear that, you didn't work for a year after that. And in general, it seems like you work pretty consistently throughout your career. But I was curious if that was the most significant dry spell that you might have had.
It was significant. I mean, it was significant because I was doing successful independent movies, and I was also, like, only months before that in Jurassic Park, the most successful movie ever. So it was like, you're being offered this, you're being, and it just stopped. which is kind of wild, and great. And by good fortune of the long path of a career, you can look back and say how great to have it be felt, how backward we are, And I took time off when I had my son, and I feel like in a way it gave room to less opportunity. And I mean, I will say it's another thing if I were a man. I think for women it's hard to take time off by choice because then you feel like you got to start all over when you're coming back to something. For everyone, it's not hard for men, so forgive me, but I just know as a woman, in whatever your place of work is, it's like, oh no, we'll give you time off. Not that much time. My friends have made the morning show. I don't know if you guys have seen some of it. I've only seen the first 2 episodes, but I mean, clearly they're getting into that territory. I think it's really interesting to explore that question.
Well, it's what Enlightened did too, because I was thinking that, basically she got punished for a sexual affair that was consensual with a male, and he didn't know, there were no repercussions for him. He got promoted, whereas you got demoted to a different. So it felt like very much part of that show from the beginning. Yeah.
For sure.
I wanted to talk.
For sure. Just realized my Valley Girl part came.
You've worked with David Lynch for a long time, and your initial meeting sounded very casual, and I was curious, like, how the relationship has evolved since, over the past 20, 30 years?
30.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was 17 on Blue Velvet. It just gets better and better. He's incredible, you guys. He's everything you want him to be. He really is. He's sweet and well, I'll tell you the best story. So he's all the things we know. I don't have to repeat it. But we had the most amazing, like one of the great nights of my life last weekend, Anik, is that right? Where we gave out the honorary Oscars this year, which you'll see the governor's awards, and then when you watch the Oscars, you'll see who we give it to and everything. But David Lynch received one, and myself, Kyle MacLachlan, and Isabella Rossellini gave him his Oscar, and it was incredible. And to see all these filmmakers in that room watch his clip reel, like, what is happening? Like you're seeing clips from movies, and they're incredible movies. And then David Lynch begins, and the whole room goes insane. Because you're watching mad genius. You're watching the ultimate Renaissance man at work. I mean, in just touching every aspect of filmmaking. Sound editing, sound mixing, composing, music design, animation, production design, all of it, is such a rarity. So it was so beautiful to share in that. But the quintessential moment I've had with David in all these years was he was holding his Oscar, and we walked back, yes, for a smoke. He needed a smoke. And as we went outside, he was holding it, and I said, what do you think, or how do you feel, or whatever? And he goes, wow, this is so pretty, or so beautiful, or whatever. And he goes, but, we're just lucky. Which people say, And I was accepting it in the way I've heard other people say it. He goes, tidbit, they're not our ideas. We're just lucky if we catch them. And I'm just like, yeah, well, that's David Lynch. And they're not our ideas. Things move through us, we didn't make them up. I just think that's really beautiful.
So, when he does the Twin Peaks return, for instance, how does he just call you up, and do you go to the Chateau Marmont and Like, does he just pitch you, hey, I want to bring the show back? Is it very casual like that?
You go to his house for cappuccino, and he says, "You're going to do something. I can't tell you what it is, but I need you to find a leopard coat from a thrift store, and we want a yellowish white lipstick." I was like, "Okay. How do you want my hair?" And then he started to describe my hair, and I was like, "What is it for?" "I can't tell you." "Is it a movie?" "I can't tell you." "What is the character?" You know. So that's where it began. And I went to the thrift shop, and I came back, and I tried wigs on for him. And then we started building this. Then he gave me a sense of my scenes. Then I realized who I was playing, which was kind of fantastic. And to play a character that was so known from Twin Peaks.
But never seen.
Was amazing. And for anyone who's seen it, you might know I basically just spent my time saying "fuck you" a lot. And it was amazing. And to be back with David and Kyle and, you know, Naomi Watts, Belina, who's worked with David several times. You know, it's a family, and we all get to just be together whenever he's ready to play again.
What was it like acting? Because that was the most, I think, significant acting scenes you've done with him in that show, right?
Amazing. So intense. I mean, it was amazing and fun and hilarious, and we had kind of my favorite moments in it. But we also had this very violent moment together. And I have to tell him this very emotional monologue and then get shot at the end of it. And we did it in one take. And I just was locking eyes with him, telling this sort of long story to him, and then have this thing happen. It was so wild to be looking in the eyes of the person who's been, directing you right here for so many years. Super beautiful and cool. This is an outrage.
I know. I don't know what to... Crap. Do you see how many note cards I still have?
Go. You can take a minute and go through. Pick your favorites.
Well, I did want to get your thoughts in general on, Martin Scorsese started this conversation when he said Marvel movies aren't cinema. And I think it's really interesting because we've been hearing from a lot of directors talk about this, and I would really like to hear from you as someone who has done franchise films and also done independent, quiet work also. And in some ways it feels like an actor needs to do both, especially now, to stay relevant. And so I'm just curious to get your thoughts on where you sort of fall on what is happening in cinema and the movie industry, and how you sort of interface with his thoughts on that declaration.
Well, he's a genius and he can say whatever he wants.
Sure.
And I will listen. And they did that beautiful documentary about the 70s. And I think it's Marty's quote at the end talking about the beginning of the era of franchises in the 80s and blockbusters. And in describing it, I think unless it's my dad, I think it's Scorsese, that my dad speaks a lot about it, about Hal Ashby, and there's a lot about the 70s filmmaking. But at the end, I think he talks about, then this came, and that was great for movies, and money, and success, and da-da-da. But at the end, he said, I miss the people. I would think that's what he's speaking to in that comment, that I think there's a lot of worry about people not going to the cinema for the people. We're here promoting this movie, Marriage Story, and it's such a beautiful movie, you guys. And I have loved being at the screening so that I can be in a cinema with other people sharing the heartbreak of longing and divorce and a love story and childhood and all the things that Noah explores. And the reminder of sitting in a cinema just to have this church-like experience of experiencing something together. And a spectacle is different. It gives you a different experience, a horror film, a Marvel film, a Star Wars film. And I love all of it. I love movies. Being in Star Wars, are you kidding? Having the great pleasure as an actor, as a human being, to see Adam Driver in Marriage Story and Adam Driver play Kylo Ren. I want him to do both of those things. He's brilliant. And they're brilliant in totally different ways. But I think, if I may, I think one thing he points out that is important is, franchises buy out your multiplex. And then, yes, there are films we see at home, but we don't want to lose church. And, we have this film Little Women coming out Christmas Day. But honestly, how amazing for Christmas Day to be with, I've just been saying, my best friend and I with our daughters and my mother, we want to go and have that experience with other people, like that shared collective. And I do think that's a big worry. And I'm so grateful to Netflix, who is protecting the Paris theater and making sure that their auteurs are getting the release that they want, which was very important to Noah, very important to Marty Scorsese. Our movie's going to be in theaters for a month guaranteed before it live streams. So I think we're all finding what the algorithm or the balance is of how to do this so that we can keep these stories alive forever and movie theaters alive forever.
Can I ask one last easy question? Which Big Little Lies character are you?
I probably was Jane. And if we ever did it again and it gets in me even a little bit more, I'm becoming Renata. Because I so agree with her on so many fronts. I think we all need Renata in us somewhere. I was just saying this when I did the Ellen TV talk show, because she was talking about that line. I will not be rich. I will not be rich.
Yes.
Yeah. People come up to me all the time quoting that line now, but they say it as though it's theirs. Because I've had other lines from movies where people are like, oh, I love when you said da-da-da-da-da, or when your character did that. They come up and like almost like this, go, I will not be. Like in my face, I'm like, you needed that. Like it's not mine, it's yours. I feel like it's everybody's, which is what's great about Renata. She's waking up the things we want to say but don't. So yeah.
Well, thank you.
Who are you? Which one are you?
I'm probably Madeline Martha McKenzie.
You are? You're a Madeline? Oh my gosh. She's amazing.
Someone has to be her.
I know. She's always there in every friend group too.
Well, I think we're out of time, but thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you for a beautiful conversation.